I came across this video today, and it's a very honest discussion about what took place that night with Kyle Rittenhouse and the Kenosha shootings. The two hosts, MCG and Jay, are joined by another person who I cannot seem to find out who that is. They didn't mention his name or anything in the description, but he's clearly a very conservative person who's come at this from a somewhat pro-Kyle standpoint, and I think that Jay and MCG are a little skeptical of that. But this is a good, honest discussion. This is the kind of conversations we should be having. Unfortunately, they do make a lot of mistakes. All three of them kind of come to this conversation with a lot of misinformation. So I thought I would kind of clear that up a little bit. Hello out there. I am trying to get through.
With his powerful brainwaves cradled in the warmth of reasoning, it's time for Johnnie Walker Dread to straighten you out on a thing or two. Emanating all the way from exciting Las Vegas, Oklahoma, it's the Johnnie Walker Dread Show.
Thank you for tuning in to the Removing Barriers podcast. I'm Jay.
And I'm MCG.
And we're attempting to remove barriers so we can all have a clear view of the cross.
This is episode 31 of the Removing Barriers podcast.
By the way, I think that this Removing Barriers podcast is a really good deal. Listening to this, I'm thinking we have a couple of people here who are inviting people on who have contrary opinions, and they're giving them the opportunity to say their piece, and there's a lot of good banter that goes back and forth. So I recommend this. This looks like a pretty good channel.
And in this episode, we'll be looking at the situation surrounding Kyle Rittenhouse and discussing whether he's a murderer or a self-defender. And we have a guest. Brother MD, welcome back.
Thank
to
you.
Removing Barriers podcast.
You know, I didn't quite catch the name, and I've played it a couple of times. MB or something like that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. We're glad to have you back here again. All right, we're going to talk about Kyle Rittenhouse, whether or not he's a murderer or a self-defender. But before we get into all the details, MD, tell me, who is Kyle Rittenhouse, and what do we know about the entirety of the situation?
What I've been able to learn basically supported what I already thought to be true, but there's been a great deal more detail. He is a high school dropout.
Okay, so right off we start with he is a high school dropout. That actually does not appear to be the case. From what I have gathered, it looks like he had joined an online high school in 2018, and therefore he was taking classes online. That is not a high school dropout. I could be wrong, though. Wendy Rittenhouse has claimed in one of her interviews that he was taking classes online. And unfortunately, the news media got a hold of the fact that he had dropped out from the current high school that he was attending and has gone full bore in claiming he was a high school dropout. The Chicago Tribune is the worst offender at that, but I even think the Washington Post kind of broadcast that misinformation as well. Now, misinformation, it could be true, but I don't think it is. I think he's probably a high school student.
Mm-hmm.
He is now 19 years old, but in the events in Kenosha, Wisconsin, he was almost 18. He was actually 17, short of 18 by about a month.
No, actually, his birthday was in January, so he was about 4 months away from his 18th birthday. Was it January? I believe it was January or February. It was recently.
Yeah, it was August 25th or 26th, somewhere around there.
Somewhere around there, yes. And he is very much a police supporter. And in fact, his social media pages showed numerous pictures of him in his police cadet uniform. He did ride-alongs with the police in his hometown. They liked him. They knew him very, very well. He was, as I say, very much a police supporter. He started a fund of his own to get people to understand the police, to bring them together. He did his scouting cadets program in behalf of the police.
And I believe that's pretty much true. All of the information I have seen sort of supports that contention.
So what we know about him was a very law-abiding, law-loving young man, although he was a dropout from high school. Apparently. I haven't been able to really get a transcript on him, so I don't know for sure.
And again, I don't. Why are we calling people who drop out like bad people or something like that? I was a high school dropout. I still got an engineering degree out of the deal down the road. And Kyle could very well end up going to junior college like I did and getting a nursing degree, which is what he said he was planning on doing. I don't see why calling somebody a high school dropout is helpful here, but whatever.
Beyond that, he was a young man who was a member of a militia, or at least affiliated with a militia.
Okay, and there is no evidence to support that. So let me go ahead and talk a little bit about that. I'm going to do a separate show on that. There is the idea that he was a member of a militia comes about from a few leap in conclusions here. And one of those is that there was a call for people to come to Kenosha to help guard property and such by a militia member. That was Kevin Mathewson of the Kenosha Guard. And so people assumed that anybody that showed up that night was a member of the militia, especially the Kenosha Guard. But there's no evidence that that is true. Facebook already poured through his social media leanings and found nothing that indicated he was in communication with anybody from a militia. And some of this might actually come from the very first time that we saw Kyle that night. Let me go ahead and play that for you here. This is what led some people to believe that he was a member of a militia.
Oh, looks like we got some people over here. How you guys doing?
Good, how are you, sir?
Good, you guys keeping the peace?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You guys with the Kenosha Guard?
No.
No? Alright, just catching.
Sorta.
Checking on. Sorta?
Yeah, I live in Kenosha.
Oh, right on.
Okay, so this is a reporter walks up to the guys that are guarding his property. There's about 4 of them, and they're young kids primarily. Kyle's probably the youngest one. He's 17, and they're just hanging around, kicking back. There's a lot of riding and stuff going on down the street, quite a ways away, probably a couple blocks at least, and these guys have no interest in getting involved in it. They're just hanging loose here. Of course, later, the police are going to push those rioters into their area. Now, they asked them, are you guys member of the Kenosha Guard? And they all say no. And then Kyle says, well, sort of. And that leads you to believe, oh, well, I guess he must be a member. But the next thing he says doesn't make any sense at all. He says, I live in Kenosha. Well, that wasn't the question. The question was, are you a member of the Kenosha Guard? It's pretty clear that Kyle misunderstood the question. And he thought he was being asked if he was from Kenosha. And he's not from Kenosha. He's from Illinois, but he spends so much time in Kenosha that he probably does feel that he is a member of the community. So it totally explains why he said sort of. So if you're wanting to believe that Kyle is a member of the militia, let's see the evidence of it. I have not seen a shred.
He had told friends he was going to Kenosha to defend the businesses there, and in particular one article I read indicated he worked at. And that was a car dealership.
I think he's getting confused here with Dominic. I think Dominic is the one that might have had a job at the car dealership, not Kyle. And I don't believe Kyle ever told anybody he was going to Kenosha to go to the protests. He was going to Kenosha to actually clean up the graffiti at the high school the next day. There's no evidence I have seen that indicates he even knew that there was going to be a protest that night until he was actually in Kenosha, because he said that he was watching the protests on TV with Dominic at Dominic's house. Therefore, he was already in Wisconsin when the protesting and rioting began.
People who live in the middles of their states may not realize how easily we cross state lines.
He's mentioning a very interesting misconception that people have when they hear about Kyle crossing state lines to go to a protest. Kyle lives very close to the state line, and in fact, I think if you drive north about 2 miles from Kyle's house, you probably end up crossing over into Illinois. So Kyle went back and forth between Illinois and Wisconsin all the time. The state line is of no relevance really whatsoever in this whole deal.
Very critical to his case is the difference in laws between Illinois and Wisconsin.
Right.
So what we know about him is he was a law-abiding young man. He was not a troublemaker. He was not given to being in trouble with the police.
Well, that's not entirely true. He did have a driving without a license deal that went on right shortly before the protests. And then there was also a fight that he got into at school, but there's certainly nothing that indicates that he had committed any serious crimes. And there's also no doubt that he seemed to have a lot of respect for law and order. Is it possible for a certain person to have a lot of respect for law and order and still drive without a license? Of course.
And in fact, one of the last lines of one of the articles that I read was rather telling. It said that, and it was from a rather liberal news perspective, and yet it said that the point of the left was to portray him as part of the domestic terrorist extreme right associated, as it must be, the article said,
Right.
with militias.
Yeah, and I do agree with him that Kyle Rittenhouse did exhibit particularly impressive self-control, and a lot of people dismiss that by saying, well, he shouldn't have shot anyone, but he shot only those that attacked him. And he had an opportunity to shoot far more people and decided not to do it. He even had an opportunity to shoot Gage Grosskreutz and passed up on it when Gage feigned that he was giving up. It was only when Gage tried to take his rifle that Kyle opened fire. And so if you talk to any policeman, I think that they would look at that and say, that's pretty impressive, especially given that police are known at times for just spraying and praying and blasting the hell out of things and fire only those shots necessary to thwart the attack. It's pretty impressive from a 17-year-old kid who is under a severe attack. He's got a mob going after him.
So he was a militiaman. He was a man who considered himself to be responsible for caring for other people.
Yeah, but he was also 17, though, so we have to keep that in perspective as well.
Sure, he was 17. But I have an 18-year-old granddaughter. I have a 16-year-old granddaughter, 14-year-old granddaughter, 12-year-old granddaughter, 10-year-old grandson, an 8-year-old, another granddaughter, all in one family, all of whom have fired a rifle exactly like the rifle he had, and do so for fun on a range at their own house.
Yeah, this is another part that the anti-Kyles have a hard time with, and a lot of them are from urban areas. They don't understand rifles. They don't understand the gun culture, and they shriek in terror whenever they see a weapon. But if you've grown up around them, it's no big deal. I've had a 30-30 since I was 9 years old. I no longer have it. My kids have all have weapons and stuff like that. This is no big deal. These are tools. I mean, and you go out and you fire them for sport. It's a lot of fun. Is it a lot of fun? Well, no, it's not a lot of fun, but it's an interesting thing to do. It's a nice way to spend the afternoon. But people from the urban cities don't get that. And they think of weapons as, obviously, this thing is intended only for one thing, is to go out and hunt somebody down and kill them. And it's ridiculous.
You, a parent, a grandparent, you have a 17-year-old son. He's going to strap a rifle on his back, and he said, Dad, I'm going over to such and such a place so I can protect this building. And you know that he's going to a riot. Would you allow your 17-year-old son to go to a riot?
I probably would not. Unfortunately for Kyle Rittenhouse, he didn't have a father. He lived with his mother. His mother was a full-time health service provider. So I can only guess that she really didn't know or have anything to say to him about it.
That's what I was about to ask. If she's a single mom, works full time, I wonder if she knew that he actually went out.
And she didn't. And there's a really good reason why that we know that, is that they've looked at her cell phone text messages. He clearly texted her when he was at the protest that he was at the protest, and that was the first she had heard about it. There's no evidence whatsoever that Wendy Rittenhouse knew that he was at the protest at all.
To Kenosha to help. That's a good
I can't
question.
find any indication whether she did or not. I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything at all. What does she know? I know she was on the news saying that her son wasn't a white supremacist, but she didn't mention whether or not she knew or not. But again, back to you again as a parent.
Just to kind of weigh in on this a little bit, the anti-Kyles want Wendy Rittenhouse charged with a crime because this is just how they operate. They see her big crime was raising a person who turns out to be a Republican and probably pro-Trump. That's the crime that they really think that she did. There's no actual law against that, and so they're going to go after her for this thing here. It's pretty clear that she had nothing to do with Kyle's involvement in the protests. The the Anticosts don't care. They don't care whether she was involved or not, knew anything about it. They want her arrested anyway. And it's not because of that. It's because they feel that she was a bad parent because she raised a kid that had political opinions contrary to their own.
Oh, no. I would tell my son that I would much prefer he didn't go.
Right, but how much blame would be placed on her as a parent, though? I was raised by a single mother, so I'm not trying to say, hey, oh, he didn't have a father, whatever the case may be, blame it on the mother. But then looking at this, how much blame should be placed on the mother that she doesn't know where her 70-year-old son is? If she didn't know, or if she knew, how much blame should be placed on her for her to allow that he went there?
And she has no legal culpability whatsoever. There's no requirement that she prevent him from going to the Kenosha riots or protests or whatever you want to call them.
I'm not really about placing blame for a young man who is, by all accounts, an adult or on the edge of adulthood. Stop and think. When I was 18 years old, I joined the U.S. Navy expecting to go to Vietnam to combat. I know many, many young Marines who live very near me who at 17 years old joined the Marine Corps and were trained in the use of weapons much, much more powerful than what Kyle Rittenhouse had, and sent into combat in Iraq and Afghanistan. He was an adult. So I would say that it's not her fault either way. I don't find any indication from her neighbors, and many of them were interviewed, I don't find any indication from her neighbors that they felt that she was a negligent mother. They would know. I wouldn't know.
Right. Again, I'm not trying to put blame on her. The question has to be asked, what the blame here, because according to the law, he was still a minor. And I know he's being charged as an adult, but according to the law, technically he was still a minor. And the problem is, and that would go to one of the charges that were placed against him, is because he was a minor. That's why the misdemeanor charge is against him. But for me, going back at his age, was it wise for a 17-year-old to be helping out in such a volatile situation? Again, if we look at the law says he's 17, he's a minor. Is it wise for him to be there helping out? And also, is it wise for him to be there helping out with a rifle, an AR-15 style rifle strapped around his shoulders?
And that's a good point. A lot of people say at 17, no parent would allow their child to be placed in such a dangerous situation. But a lot of parents allow their kids to join the military at 17, and your chances of getting hurt there are probably much, much higher than going to a riot. Keep in mind, of all the people there that night, Kyle wasn't hurt. So what possible relevance is the age?
Let's first go to the question of, was it wise for him to be there? That'll be debated forever. Was it wise for anyone to be there?
I will say no.
What about Grosskreutz? Should he have been there?
I would say no.
What about the reporter? By the way, you mentioned the reporter. I read an article. I read a report that reporter is actually being charged with a misdemeanor, reckless endangerment, because he apparently is the one who fired the pistol directly behind Rittenhouse as Rittenhouse was running, and may have precipitated Rittenhouse turning and shooting the man behind him. Now, Grosskreutz, in the videos I saw, and admittedly they were dark, it's hard to tell for sure, but he had a pistol in his hand. Many witnesses said that. And in the videos I saw, it looked like I saw a muzzle flash at least once from his pistol.
Okay, so he's gotten three people confused here. The person who fired the pistol was a guy named Joshua Zeminski, and he is not a reporter at all. He's just an Antifa antagonist. He's out there causing trouble. He has a long criminal history, and none of it is serious, but it shows that he has a complete, utter disregard for law and order. Jumps bail, refuses to get driver's licenses numerous times. He's a repeat offender for a lot of things. And so he has a pistol, and he's the one that's going to open fire that caused Kyle, well, we think it caused Kyle to turn around and face his attacker. The reporter is Richard McGinnis, and he is a person who has been out with Kyle Rittenhouse all night, basically capturing his movements and all that. And he's the one that was on the scene of the Rosenbaum shooting and tried to save Rosenbaum's life. You can see him taking his shirt off at one point to try to stop the bleeding. Gage Grosskreutz is a totally different person. Gage Grosskreutz is chasing after Kyle after he initially interviewed him and asked him where he was going. And Kyle told him, I'm innocent and I'm trying to go to the police. And Gage pulled a gun on him and got his arm shot off. So, well, he still has it. But at any rate, so again, he's conflating three different people and putting them into one.
Some of the witnesses said he fired at Rittenhouse.
That I don't know about. All of the information I have seen indicates that Zeminski, not Gage, but Zeminski fired up in the air. And I haven't seen any video evidence to the contrary. Zeminski has been charged, but strangely enough, not for anything related to the shootings. It was for arson that took place earlier in the evening. And I think that the prosecution is trying to avoid charging him with anything related to the Kenosha shootings because that could undermine their case. Maybe, maybe not.
So the question is, one, was it wise for him to be there? I think that'll be debated by a lot of people. I don't think it necessarily was wise for him to be there. But it certainly was an honorable thing for him to be there if he was there to protect people's livelihoods and to provide medical care, which was one of the things he said he was there for.
That's a good point. I mean, whether it was wise or not, it was honorable. I mean, he was out there to try to do good. It might have been a little bit foolish and naive. That's debatable. But his intentions are noble. I don't see any evidence whatsoever that he was out there to try to cause anybody any harm.
On the next question, was it wise for him to be carrying a weapon? I think it'd be foolish to be there and not be carrying a weapon. Was it wise for him to be carrying a weapon which was so visible and obvious? My personal weapon of choice isn't that visible and obvious. And in a situation like that, I don't carry a long gun. But if I wanted people to understand, I have a stinger, and if you attack me, there will be a penalty.
Well, okay, so just to be clear here, he's talking about a pistol that he concealed carries. Kyle could not do that. That would have been a very serious crime. It would have been also a federal crime. So Kyle cannot carry a gun. And if he was carrying a gun, it was concealed out, it made him even more guilty in the eyes of the anti-Kyles. So you can't win with these people. But his choice of weapon, I covered it in another video, was probably on the mark. The only other weapon that he really could have used that would have been comparable would have been a shotgun, and that would even, in my opinion, been worse in the minds of the anti-Kyles. You can't win with these deals. So was his choice of the AR-15 correct? Yeah, I think so. I think that was actually a good choice.
The way I look at it is someone much smarter than me came up with their 4 rules of stupid. And I'm not saying Kyle Rittenhouse is stupid or anything. You know, some folks don't like the word stupid, but the 4 rules of stupid is like, don't go stupid places at stupid times, doing stupid things with stupid people. And it is said that if you break at least 2 of those, you're looking for trouble. You can break 1 and maybe get away, but if you break 2 or more of those, you're looking for trouble. And I'm thinking, okay, being at the Riot is a stupid place. I don't remember exactly what time it was, but it was after dark. And I'm going to guess it was probably maybe around 10 or so. I don't remember.
I think it was.
But that was a stupid time. He was definitely there with stupid people. Yeah, can you argue whether or not he was doing stupid things? His stated purpose of being there was noble. So I'm going to give him 3 out of 4. He broke 3 of the 4 rules of stupid. I'll say, man, I don't think it was wise for him to be there.
That's true, but that applies to everybody there. And guess what? Most of them, the vast majority of them, didn't have anything bad happen to them. The people who were shot were doing even stupider things. But Kyle, yeah, I mean, he was probably wishes he hadn't gone there that night. But this is all a hindsight. I mean, Kyle didn't expect that anything bad was going to happen, and something did. And then we can go back and ridicule all of these decisions. But all those people there that night were doing stupid things in stupid places at stupid times and so on. And yet, the vast majority of them didn't have anything bad happen to them.
I really don't. I understand the noble cause. I understand everything. But I also will say, I don't think it was wise to be there with a visible weapon like that, especially being a 17-year-old. For me, and again, I'm not dragging him on in the mud and all this stuff, but I'm simply saying, at that point, and I don't want to blame his mother, but at this point, you are going as a minor into a place where you know, in my mind, because I'm thinking, you know that this thing is going to become dirty.
Well, okay, if you know it's going to become dirty and therefore you're going to end up shooting someone, then why didn't anybody else shoot somebody that night? I mean, there's a lot of people with guns there. And Kyle was the only one that actually used it. And the truth of it is that what happened to Kyle was somewhat of a freak incident. He ran up against the wrong guy. Joseph Rosenbaum is a lunatic and mistook him, I think, for somebody else. And Kyle couldn't have foreseen that. Kyle went there with the idea that he was going to go out there with his rifle. And he was going to go out there and help people. And he'd probably get some Facebook postings on it. And he didn't know that this was going to happen. This is hindsight. And we can nitpick it all day long. But again, I don't think Kyle was necessarily doing anything wrong by just simply going to the protests. His age has nothing to do with it. I mean, I don't see any reason to believe that if he was 18, that anything would have changed. I mean, how would Rosenbaum have treated him differently if he turned out to be 18 years old instead of 17? What's the age have anything to do with what happened that night?
We knew that, hey, you go to these places, they're going to be gunshot, they're going to be fire, they're going to be looting, this is well-known knowledge. So if you're going to go in these places, I would say yes. If you're going to go there, at least walk with something to protect yourself. But I'm thinking a 17-year-old going to that place and then carrying an open, you're going to be a target. The target is going to be on his back because you have a rifle strapped over you and you are opposing what the majority was doing. So you're putting out the fire when they're setting the fire.
But again, Kyle was the only one that was attacked that night. And so this idea somehow that, well, he should have known he was going to be attacked. Well, if it was that certain, why weren't others attacked that night? I don't think it was reasonable to think that he would have been attacked, especially since you're carrying an AR-15 rifle. You would think that most people would say, you know, I'm pretty safe here. I'm pretty safe because I'm carrying this weapon out here and nobody's dumb enough to attack me. And therefore, under those circumstances, I can understand why it was a perfectly rational thing for Kyle to do. Unfortunately, he ran up against a very irrational person in Joseph Rosenbaum. And the other two numbnuts that chased after him were equally culpable as well.
So they're going to be against you. So, and having a visible weapon, I would say on the wise part, whether or not it was wise for him to be there, I would say that's a big no in my book.
Well, devil's advocate here. Mm-hmm. Law enforcement officers break all 4 rules of stupid literally every moment of every day of their lives.
But that's their job. That's what they need to do. You know.
Well, and Kyle Rittenhouse did say, and according to the articles I read, he actually identified so much with it that standing and talking to the police, he said, this is our job. This is what we need to do. But remember, go back to the beginning. Kyle Rittenhouse had been a police cadet, had ridden with the police on numerous patrols. What he saw while on those patrols, I have no idea. But I have ridden with the police. I've ridden with the California State Highway Patrol. I can tell you it's not a boring job when you're not a policeman. Probably a little bit intoxicating when you think about, I could be doing this too. And of course, as a current militia member, I could be doing those things. Matter of fact, we do.
He raises a really good point. People say that Kyle should not have been there at the protest because, after all, he's doing the job of the police and all that, and he's putting himself into a really stupid situation, taking unnecessary risks. But when they asked Kyle, he said, hey, this is an unnecessary risk, but I have to do it. It's a part of my community dedication. And so they're completely discounting that. I can understand a young person of 17 years old thinking, yeah, the police aren't here. They're not helping. Somebody's got to do it. It's on me. It's my community. And I'm going to go ahead and pick up my rifle and I'm going to go out there and do what I can to help people. And yes, it's an unnecessary risk, but you know what? We take risks sometimes. And the same people who blast him for taking unnecessary risk to protect his community are the same ones that defend the behaviors of Anthony Hooper and Gage Grosskreutz for chasing him. And so they're saying, like, well, they had to do it. Somebody had to go in there and stop them. Well, okay, they put themselves in a position where they got shot. They did a stupid thing at a stupid time. And, well, I'm not sure I would call Kyle stupid, but, they will. But doesn't that also indicate that they're at fault?
Messaging of what an AR-15 is on a person, it means two different things to two different groups of people. Like
Yes.
to us, the AR-15 is a symbol of freedom. It's a symbol of responsibility and of defending and taking care of your own and your neighborhood. But to people on the left, it's a symbol of oppression. It's a symbol of hate and violence, and no one ought to have it. And so all of these things will probably play into how everything plays out in court.
She has a very good point there, and how the AR-15 is kind of viewed as a kind of symbol on both sides. And unfortunately for Kyle, that's what he was carrying at night, and they're going to use that. So good point.
And so we know that after he shot those people, he went and turned himself in, especially after he aimed at, I can't remember who the last person was. He aimed at the last person, might have been Grosskreutz.
I think it was, yes.
Right. And then after that, he walked away and turned himself in to the police. But as he was walking toward the police, they pretty much told him to get out of the way. And they didn't stop him. They didn't do anything to apprehend him. And people wondered about that.
And the important things to remember about that are that these are not the police in his hometown with whom he had done the ride-along.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any reason to assume, nor have I found any statement that indicates that the police in Kenosha knew him.
And
they didn't know him.
I don't think they had any reason to assume that he had just shot people, right? They were literally just coming into the situation. They don't know who's who, right? They don't.
And that was what their supervisor said.
And I have a theory that when Kyle was running at first from the Rosenbaum scene, that somebody called him the N-word. And I have a feeling that somebody called that in and thought it was a black person running. And so the police were told, we do know that dispatch told police at one point that the suspect was a black person. And so possibly the police thought that, well, it can't be this guy because we heard from the 911 caller that there was a black person that shot Gage and Anthony. So it's hard to say. I don't think it really means much of anything, to be honest with you. Who cares?
And I will tell you that the best you can do, because they are focused on if there is or was a weapon, if there is or was a hostile act, if there is or was someone behaving in a violent manner, we don't want any of that happening. And we'll iron it all out when everyone's laying on their faces on the ground.
Right, right.
So the best thing you can do is exactly what they tell you to do. Now, here's a problem in Rittenhouse's case. They told him, get out of the street, go home. Mm-hmm. Now, no reason to think they knew he lived in Illinois, let alone rather than in Wisconsin. But he did get out of the street. He did go home.
And he was criticized for going home, even though he was told by the police to go home. Maybe that should be another dumb argument coming up.
He did turn himself in. And one of the charges against him is fleeing justice.
Yeah, that was dropped though.
Was it dropped?
Yeah.
Okay. The articles I read may be old on that. I didn't see that it had been dropped.
Yeah. Initially,
I didn't realize he was been charged with
Initially, he was charged, and I think that one was dropped.
I don't remember him ever actually being charged with fleeing justice, but I could be wrong. Keep in mind that a lot of people mistake that for fleeing the scene of a crime. Completely two different things. Kyle fled the scene of the shooting of Rosenbaum and the other two, but it's not fleeing the scene of a crime because it has not been established that a crime has been committed yet. He hasn't been tried and convicted. The anti-Kyles get it confused with fleeing the scene of an accident, which is a motor vehicle code. What fleeing from justice is that when the police would be trying to detain him and he runs, that would be fleeing from justice, but there's no indication that the police were trying to detain him. And therefore the charges were dropped. Although, again, I don't remember them ever actually charging that against him. Must have missed it.
I'm glad. It would have really been a lot of egg on the faces of law enforcement had they tried to make that stick. Because there are too many witnesses to the fact that he tried to turn himself in.
Right.
And ultimately did turn himself in.
Right.
Right.
So I was looking at my notes here and some interesting points. One of the articles, and this is from NPR, right? We all know NPR is very biased. Democrats, this is their statement, have pointed to Rittenhouse as the embodiment of the threat posed by domestic terrorism. Oh, really? He's a militiaman. That makes him a domestic terrorist.
He's not even a militiaman.
Check with Capitol Hill. If you're a militiaman, you're a domestic terrorist. Now, by law. After the shootings, Rittenhouse, and this is from USA Today. After the shootings, Rittenhouse walked toward police with his hands up, but they told him to get out of the street. He and his friend drove back to Illinois, where, with his mother, he turned himself into local police. Now, all of that did happen before they dropped that charge. So again, I'm glad they dropped that charge. And then the other one, and this was a comment by a lady who lived in his community and who only knew that he'd been arrested. She didn't know him personally, no interaction with her kids.
Right.
Maybe he thought he was doing the right thing, but you don't kill somebody. That's not your business to kill someone for messing with someone else's business. That's for the cops to deal with.
And yeah, that's irresponsible. He was not defending property at the time that he was attacked. The fact that he was there to defend property has nothing to do whatsoever with the actual shootings.
And yet, the statement by his own defense, and I believe it's a true statement, I believe it's right, is that he was defending himself. In the videos I saw, the first case, he was being pursued down the street by a raft of people who were screaming and yelling about what they were going to do to him. I would have been terrified.
And he's talking about the case where Kyle was running from Gage Grosskreutz and Anthony Huber and the other half of the Cheyenne Nation, trying to basically chase him down and kick the crap out of him. They said that they were only trying to take his weapon from him. That's not what was being said when he was running. And you don't try to take someone's weapon away from them by hitting them with a skateboard. Now, they were just there to try to beat him up as much as they could, in my opinion. But that's a source of contention.
So he fired one round at someone who did overtake him. Someone outran him. Guy was closing in on him. Then, as he turned to run, he tripped and fell. And the second guy came up after him with a skateboard in his hand. And witnesses said, skateboard in his right hand, he hit Rittenhouse in the head with a skateboard, while with his other hand, he tried to wrestle the AR-15 out of his hands.
He's gotten a little bit confused here. Well, I mean, he's made it sound like there was almost no time between the time that he shot Joseph Rosenbaum and the attack by Anthony Huber. But, you know, we all know that there was a few minutes that went by.
If I'm in possession of a firearm and someone tries to take it away from me, my one thought is, if he gets it, I'm dead.
Yes, I agree. And that's what my first thought would be. And I have a feeling a lot of people on the jury are also going to be thinking that.
Yeah, a police officer said to me once, if someone is wrestling for my gun and they get it, what do you think they're going to do with it?
Now, keep in mind, he's coming from the left side. Well, okay, so he's kind of skeptical of the right's portrayal of Kyle Rittenhouse, but even he is saying, hey, yeah, trying to take any person's gun from him is really a dangerous thing. And so how you're going to get 12 people on a jury to all think that, well, Joseph Rosenbaum wouldn't have hurt him if he'd have gotten the gun from Kyle?
Good question. And I think the answer is pretty obvious. So Rittenhouse fired 4 shots and killed him. Grosskreutz, 20 feet away, kneeling, pistol in his hand, fires it.
Again, Grosskreutz never actually fired his weapon.
I don't know, maybe he was just shooting at something on the ground. Maybe he was shooting at a rabbit. I don't know. But I don't think that's the case. And Rittenhouse, and again, I made the comment earlier that I think he demonstrated extremely good control. He fired 1 round, hit Grosskreutz in the arm that had the gun. Severe damage to his arm. An AR-15 can do that. 223 rounds tumble once they hit. and they do a lot of damage internally. But the point is,
This is kind of a misconception. I mean, pretty much all bullets will tumble once they hit a body. The reason why the AR-15 bullet tumbles so much is because it's relatively small. It doesn't have a lot of moment of inertia about the yaw axis, is what we might call it here. So a lot of people think that it was designed to do that. It's not. It's just a small caliber bullet. And again, they're quite prone to tumble when they hit the body. A .22 pistol will do the same thing. It's not designed to do that. That's another misconception, that the AR-15 was designed to do that. It's not true. The bullet is rifled, so in other words, it goes through a rifled barrel, and therefore comes out with a very high amount of angular momentum, which gives it a lot of stability about the yaw axis. And therefore, it does not tumble when it goes through the air. Once it hits the flesh, it can, and that can increase its damage, but there's nothing special about the AR-15 about that. It's generally true of all bullets, and especially true of smaller bullets.
He fired one round. He did not fire 4, 5, 6 rounds. He did not intend to kill Grosskreutz. At least I can't imagine he did, because if it had been me and I intended to, I think on our earlier podcast, I may have mentioned that when I practice with my sidearm, I practice at 15 yards. I have 14 rounds in the magazine, and in 17 seconds, routinely, I put all 14 rounds in a 4.5-inch diameter circle.
Yeah, Kyle doesn't have that kind of marksmanship, but here's the point. It doesn't matter. Kyle saw a threat. He's got a guy with a gun, and he turns around, and he shoots to stop the threat. What you're trained to do is shoot for center mass, and that is the person's chest. He saw a hand with a gun in it, and he saw an arm connected to it, and he aimed at the arm because that's what he saw as the threat. And he probably should not have done that if he had been highly trained. He should have shot Gage Grosskreutz in the chest, which would have killed him. But he instead shot at the thing that he saw as the biggest threat. And that's okay with self-defense. I mean, you have to shoot to stop the threat. And in Kyle's opinion and Kyle's actions, that's what he tried to do. It just wasn't quite what you're trained to do. But the fact that he got off the round and nailed Gage in the arm was a pretty good shot.
If I can do that, I'm pretty sure Kyle Rittenhouse could have done that. And he certainly demonstrated with the other 2 people whom he shot that he could put the rounds where he wanted to put them. If he wanted to kill Grosskreutz, he would have done it.
Yeah, I definitely believe so. I think the question was the police negligent in their approach?
And I don't think they necessarily were. I mean,
no, definitely not.
One of the serious problems I have with trying to answer that question, and not with other people answering it or trying to. I wasn't there. But my answer would be, if I were a policeman, that in any situation in which I didn't tell him on your face, on the ground, be quiet, I probably missed an opportunity. I don't think it necessarily means I was negligent, but I probably missed an opportunity to further defuse the situation.
Yeah, I don't even think they knew what was going on at a point, because if you look at the video, they were coming up in their RVs and whatever stuff, armored.
Could Kyle Rittenhouse's situation be one where he was insensitive, I guess, to the situation, what that rifle might mean? So, you're not going to a place where people agree with you or think like you, and you have this weapon on your person, and you know what they must think that weapon represents. You say you're here to help, but you're wearing something that's such an offense to us. You have a weapon that's such an offense to us. Could his situation be one where he's provoking them with the weapon?
This kind of smacks of she should have known that wearing that dress was going to excite those dudes. Really? It's okay to attack Kyle because he was carrying something that makes us mad? Okay.
Even though he doesn't even intend to, he's provoking them just by having the weapon. And then when they react, he can just cry self-defense.
Technically, I would say he could have been insensitive and provoking them. But as soon as we move to so he could cry self-defense, we're into the realm of premeditation. He wasn't insensitive. In that case, we're into the realm of he knew full well what he was doing. and he intended. And so we're falling right back into that. Is he guilty or is he innocent? Did he plan it or did he suffer a failure of some kind that caused it?
I don't disagree with necessarily with the idea that a lot of the reasons why these militia types, and I'm not saying that Kyle's a member of a militia, but one of the reasons why that they carry the AR-15 is because they know it kind of bugs the left a little bit. You know, it is kind of a symbol to the left, and I don't know if Kyle did it for that reason, but he might have. But the point is very simple. It doesn't matter. You don't think that the left doesn't carry around messages on their signs designed to provoke people? I mean, it's a protest. It's kind of what you do at a protest. You do things to provoke the other side. And yet, no one ever would argue that a person carrying a sign that says that cops are fascists would justify police doing something to that person. This is a real thin argument here.
I think insensitivity, but I don't think thought beyond insensitivity. And maybe a critical factor here is that of all the rifles sold in the United States, probably somewhere around 60% of them are AR-15 style, i.e. they look like AR-15s, whether they're chambered in 223 or 308 or 300 blackout or who knows what chambering. But they look like AR-15s. Probably 60% of the rifles sold in the United States. I will tell you that having fired a 223 in an AR-15 frame, I handed it back to the man from whom I borrowed it after firing 10 rounds and literally stacking them touching on a 100-yard range over open sights. And I said, this rifle makes me look like a lot better shooter than I'll ever really be.
Yeah, it's a misconception that the AR-15 is a terrible rifle for like hunting and stuff like that. It's a little underpowered, but it's quite accurate. It's a good hunting rifle. And for hog control, can't beat it. Nothing better.
It's one of the most pleasant rifles in the world to shoot. It's no wonder it's so comfortable and so popular.
Especially among women, because they would call it a puppy dog compared to, say, a shotgun. So
I compare the sound and the feeling of a 223 when I think about shooting a 22 rifle, which I used to shoot on a high school rifle team in competition. The 22 rifle makes a spiteful spit. The 223 makes a spiteful snap. But in neither case do you even know you fired it if you didn't hear it. They're so comfortable and easy to shoot.
Well, don't ask that one reporter who shot one who said he went into PTSD from it. I don't know if you all saw that, but one of the most disgraceful exposés by a reporter I've ever seen. He went out and shot an AR-15 and claimed he got PTSD from the huge noise and the huge kick and everything like that. And so, yeah, okay. They had follow-up videos where they had 8-year-old girls shooting the thing. It was pretty embarrassing for him.
It happens that they're also deadly.
yeah, I wouldn't even say he was insensitive. While I would say I don't think he should have been there and I don't think he was wise for a 17-year-old to be there, I don't even think he was insensitive because, again, if you're going to make the decision to go there, I would go there armed. If I was going there, I'm definitely going to take something with me that I can protect myself. I probably wouldn't go there. Trust me, if you find me at a riot, I would be dead and someone would have killed me and dragged me there because you wouldn't find me at a riot. That's how much I am against going to these places.
Well, and I will tell you, as a militiaman, and I am an active militiaman, I've not yet been to a violent situation. But just this last weekend, I was part of an organization in Southwest that went down to provide disaster relief. Personal cost, about $150 for 2 days that we spent. The other members, I don't know. But I do know we delivered nearly 4.5 tons of much-needed food, bottled water, clothing, blankets, heating equipment to an area that had absolutely none of those things and had single-digit nights and only mid-15 temperatures in the daytime for 9 days straight. Those people had not had anything. They were very much appreciative. And, oh, by the way, we were in the police department parking lot in the local town the whole time, and the police were out helping us with what we were delivering. And I'm probably the only one of our members who didn't have a weapon on me. We weren't going into a violent situation. It's just a practice, it's a habit.
Yeah, the rifle is kind of a uniform. It's part of the uniform. And that's one of the reasons why I think Kyle wanted to have it so badly, was that if you're going to go and guard property as part of a sort of a group out to do community service, he wants to wear the uniform. And so you got your AR-15 rifle. But I don't think that carrying a rifle means that you're out to hurt anybody. In fact, I know that's the case. I've carried one. Yeah, I carried one to, well, it wasn't a protest, it was a demonstration. And the difference between the protest and the demonstration is not designed to be confrontational. It's just designed to show your support for something. And yeah, I carried the AR-15 rifle. I didn't need it, but it was part of the deal. We just carried one, no big deal. It's a rifle. So what?
I kind of think if I were where Kyle Rittenhouse had been, I probably would be carrying a long gun, and it would be something very intimidating, because if I'm going to carry it and be in some place which I expect to be dangerous, I'd like people, at least those who think before they act, to look at me and say, nope, not where he is. We'll go somewhere else.
Yeah, but another thing we also keep in mind, he was 17, and that means he most likely, in most states, if not all 50, he wasn't old enough to get a concealed carry permit. So the only thing he probably could have been legally carrying
Was constitutional carry, you mean?
Yeah, he's wrong there. There's states that do allow 17-year-olds to carry a rifle. And in fact, Wisconsin might be one of those. That's a little bit of a matter for debate.
whether it's constitutional carry or not. Most states, if you're 17, you can't carry a handgun. At least federal laws say you can buy a handgun at 18, not a handgun, a long gun, a rifle at 18, and a pistol at 21. So he was far away from even being able to carry a pistol.
Oh, my mistake. I misunderstood. He was talking about a pistol. Yeah, he's right. Carrying a pistol would not have been a good thing for Kyle to do that night.
Conceal. So we know he couldn't have done that. Another thing was that I think because he went over into Illinois, and their laws, because of their firearm law say, hey, you're too young to even have this weapon.
It doesn't matter what Illinois says. I mean, he was in Wisconsin. Wisconsin laws apply. And I get what he's trying to say is that Kyle, if anybody, should have known better. But Kyle is going to go by what Wisconsin says. And keep in mind, he's also talking to Dominic Black. And Dominic might have told him, at 17, you can actually carry here. How do we know? Well, it's hard to say. It doesn't absolve him of a crime if he committed one, but it makes it more understandable.
Yeah, 15. I don't know what Kenosha law says, but in Illinois, he was too young to have that weapon. But also, I think he borrowed the weapon from a friend that lived in Illinois.
That's part of the argument. Actually, the friend from whom he borrowed the weapon lived in Wisconsin.
Oh.
And apparently, and again, I'm not real well versed on law, but apparently from the narratives I've read that tried to build the details of all of the involvement, since he is not accused by the Kenosha police of bringing the weapon from Illinois, which obviously would be something they would have to coordinate with the police in Illinois anyway, apparently he was legally allowed to be in possession of the weapon in Kenosha, Wisconsin, as long as he was with responsible adults.
That is true.
And the argument was
And the argument is that he got separated from those responsible adults by the attack on the group of which he was a member, because that all preceded the shooting.
I need to go back. That's actually not quite true. The issue here is whether he really required a certificate of achievement to be able to carry that rifle. If he had a certificate of achievement, it's pretty clear that he could have. However, he doesn't. And the question now is, does he require one if he's not hunting? Well, that's a matter of debate. I have a feeling the state's going to find him guilty of the minor in possession charge, but there's a lot of lawyers out there saying that, nope, he was legally allowed to have that rifle. We'll see which one of us wins in that one.
right.
That's one of the reasons he was running in the first place. And that seems to be a narrative that's bought into by both sides. So it makes it very hard to figure out whether he was illegal or legal in possession of the weapon, because he's not even charged with having purchased or brought the weapon. In fact, the fellow who loaned him the weapon was at least considered for misdemeanor charges for loaning a minor the weapon.
Right.
Actually, I think those are felony charges.
But I think that may have been dropped too because he was with him until they were separated. So now you get down to the issue of why were they separated and could he have avoided being separated from him?
Well, he's gotten Dominic Black confused with Ryan Balch a little bit. Kyle didn't get separated from Dominic. Kyle left with Ryan Balch to go look for wounded protesters, and Dominic stayed up on the roof. He got separated from Ryan Balch, who is a former military guy. He's got an AR-15 rifle, by the way, and for some reason, nobody attacked him, even though, according to what we hear here, he was going into a stupid place with stupid time and stupid reasons or whatever. So just to make sure we're clear here, Dominic Black, who was the one that loaned him the rifle, if you want to use that term, was not the one that Kyle was walking around with.
I don't know. You get a bunch of people who are attacking and you run, and do you get separated or don't you? I don't know. I wasn't there. I'll tell you, the police have a hard time with this one. They have the politics involved.
Yeah, definitely.
But then on top of that, they have the issue of we weren't there either. So we have to try to figure it out after the case. And I will tell you from every law enforcement officer I know, and I have many friends who are law enforcement officers, active duty now, they'll tell you that eyewitnesses, if you have only one, you can have a very certain testimony. It's probably wrong. If you have 5, you've got at least 7 conflicting testimonies because at least 2 of them are going to change before it's all over. And they're never going to agree. So I wouldn't want to be a policeman in Kenosha, Wisconsin, trying to unravel this thing.
Well, the good thing is there are a lot of videos, and those videos have been preserved. There are a lot of videos on YouTube and all over the internet. So I'm sure the police and his defense and all these have copies of those videos that they will probably...
Yeah, the problem is that the anti-Kyles generally don't watch the videos. They'll watch the ones that were shown on national television, the little clips and stuff like that that portray Kyle in a negative light, but they're not going to watch all of the footage. They don't want to. They don't want to see anything that might portray Kyle in a positive light. Nobody that I know that has watched the full footage with an open mind has come away thinking that Kyle should be convicted of anything. Most of those who want him convicted have complete misconceptions about what took place that night, and they're not going to listen. They're not going to change their mind because you try to straighten them out. It's hopeless. I'm telling you.
Show in court. That's a good thing about it because, yeah, eyewitness report is probably one of the most unreliable witness there is because everybody sees stuff through the lens of their own eyes and their emotions and all the stuff that was going on at that point.
Their own personal filters.
Right.
Yeah.
You're listening to the Removing Barriers podcast. We'll continue our discussion with MD about Kyle Rittenhouse, whether he's a murderer or a self-defender. We'll be right back.
Do you have the desire to earnestly contend for the faith which was once delivered unto the saints? Answers and VDs. Download one
But where's the line between MD?
hope that is in you.
So, MD, another question. I know you're not a lawyer, but where's the line between being a murderer and being a self-defender in this situation?
I think any lay perspective would have to say that a murderer is someone who intends to kill someone before any events even occur to cause that murder to happen. Self-defense would be the events developed around me and I feared for my life.
Yeah, it's pretty rough there. I've gone through the self-defense laws pretty thoroughly on my channel. And by the way, you only have to fear serious bodily injury, not death.
And I can tell you from having sat as a jury foreman in a murder trial, I bet you didn't know that about me.
No.
But it was a fascinating experience. You don't need to choose to be the jury foreman. In fact, the judge chose who was going to be the jury foreman, and they decided it was me. I can tell you that the question of would I, in that same situation, consider the response to be reasonable is a very, very critical question. And on that hinges the self-defense defense.
Yeah, definitely. I think there can be a very fine line between there, because the argument can be made, did he provoke the situation by running and putting out the fire? Of course, the images and the videos are not clear whether it was him who actually put out the fire with the fire extinguisher or whatever the case may be. But did he provoke the situation? Of course, we know the first person who was shot and killed was, I think it was Joseph Rosenbaum. And from watching the videos, Joseph Rosenbaum didn't look like a guy that I would say that looked very peaceful. Of course, I don't know the guy. I didn't know him. He's dead now, but he didn't look like a guy that was trying to be peaceful with Kyle Rittenhouse.
Well, no, in fact, we know he wasn't peaceful. He's on video all night trying to get into arguments and fights. And he was let out of a mental health clinic earlier in the day. He's bipolar. He's nuts. And he has a very violent past. And he has a very violent upbringing. And not all of it's not necessarily his fault. But it is what it is. He's a violent man. And he's got a burr under his saddle that night. And Kyle doesn't. Kyle doesn't have really much of a violent past. There was that one fight that he got into. Kids get into fights all the time. But other than that, he's not a violent person, as we can tell. And he's certainly not out there trying to provoke anyone, at least nothing on video. And I know that a lot of people are saying, well, what about what Jeremiah said? Show me the video. Kyle's on video all night long. There's no evidence whatsoever he provoked anyone. He's walking around trying to be a medic.
He come across as like, look at me, I'm going to beat your head in, basically, kind of thing.
Well, it's interesting to note that of all people, Snopes, in one of their infamous fact-checking, brought up the topic of the, let's see if I can say this the way Snopes said it. I had a hard time reading it with a straight face. Might not be easy to say with a straight face. The right is guilty of trying to deny the three victims their martyrdom by bringing up their criminal records.
Bringing up their criminal records, as far as I'm concerned, I want the truth. I want to know what's going on. I want to know everything about these people. Now, I understand that this is not all admissible in court. Fine, I have no problem with that. But I'm not going to sit there and bury my head in the sand and pretend that these people are really nice people if they're not. I want to know, what were they like? What were they about? And the more we dig into it, the more we kind of find out that these are not necessarily nice people. Gajan especially seems to be one that kind of had his act together for the most part. He is a person who has been arrested for robbery, burglary in fact, and he does have a domestic violence incident with his grandmother. Anthony Huber is a repeat offender domestic violence, but I don't get the same level of craziness out of them as I do with Joseph Rosenbaum.
And so Snopes said, we need to find out what the truth is of their criminal records. In typical Snopes fashion, they said partially true, partially false, then went on in detail, and sure enough, all three were guilty under law and had served the things they were charged with. And the particular man you're talking about, one of the things he was charged with and served time for was strangulation. Another was when he threatened and attacked family members, both by hand and with a knife, and tried to kill him. And I believe it was his mother tried to get him to allow her to take him to a hospital for psychiatric care because he was behaving in a very bizarre and violent fashion. And so he attacked her and tried to strangle her.
Yeah, I don't think he's got his facts right there. I went through exposés of all three people, Grosskreutz, Huber, and Rosenbaum, and I think he's conflating their backgrounds a little bit. I'm not going to go through it in great detail. Huber is the one that threatened his brother with a butcher knife, threatened to gut him like a pig, and then kicked his sister later, a separate incident. So he's a repeat offender, domestic violence. It's Rosenbaum who has the real nasty background.
So is he a peaceful guy? No, you probably had a pretty good observation. The second one, what was his name? Gruber, I think?
Huber.
I'm sorry?
I think it's Huber, Huber.
Huber, yes. The extreme right, the bad guys in this case, said that he was a pedophile. Snopes was forced to agree that he had served time as a pedophile.
Okay, so he's got Huber and Rosenbaum confused. Okay, it happens.
Criminals? Yeah, okay. Grosskreutz? He had been charged numerous times.
By the way, I should mention, it wasn't just pedophilia. This is another thing that has kind of been swept under the rug. It's rape. Rosenbaum raped a bunch of kids ages 9 through 11. So it's not just pedophilia, which kind of comes across as maybe inappropriate touching or possession of child pornography or something like that. No, this was really serious. And he served 10 years in prison for that. You don't serve 10 years in prison for just mere pedophilia.
With violence, domestic violence, and violence against people he barely knew. So these weren't peaceful people. These weren't nice people. These weren't people that I would take home to mama for dinner. That's just an observation. I would say your observation in looking at the videos was probably pretty accurate. He probably didn't look like he was intending to be friendly.
Right. I did do some research in their background, but even not bringing up their background, just the demeanor of Rosenbaum before he got shot and everything didn't say to me, hey, this guy was really like, look at me, I'm Jack and I'm in charge here. Just the attitude kind of thing, the countenance on his face kind of telling me that, hey, this guy is not really a guy you want to be messing with at this point, and he's probably capable of doing something really crazy, if you want to put it that way.
It wasn't just attitude. He was setting fires, and he was actively trying to get into a fight.
So I just didn't feel like, hey, look, this guy is, again, I don't know him, so I don't know, but the vibe I get from watching the video, looking at him, you can tell by someone's face, demeanor, if they're meaning harm or they have some good intent. He just didn't look that way to me. He looked like he was like, oh, you put out my fire, I'm going to get you for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would suggest that in any urban situation, if you can't look at someone and at least have an idea whether they mean you harm, you're probably a victim. Just waiting to happen. So, yeah, you're probably right.